Where are Dante's weapons? In every Devil May Cry, we see this guy collecting the coolest weapons ever. There's a sword that shoots lightning, a guitar that shoots lightning, a gauntlet that incinerates everything around him, nunchucks, a winged backpack that's full of spectral swords that you stick on enemies or even into the air, and then you throw a rose at them to make them explode? Man, that's a lot! But this lot never comes back. And some people out there say that Dante sells his weapons. But does he? And why does he use Rebellion in Devil May Cry 3, but then in DMC1 the sword doesn't even show up? Did he sell Rebellion too? Then in Devil May Cry 2 he just remembers, oh right, I've got that sword lying around somewhere. There are a lot of unanswered gaps, and the games never tell you what happens to such weapons. So, as usual on the channel, I went deep, I went real deep, to find real information and show you in this video what fate each weapon met, and also to debunk a few myths. Hello everyone, this is Dante BlackEX, your channel for games of hack and slash. And if there's one thing every Devil May Cry fan dreams about, is getting to use that awesome weapon from a previous game again. Imagine reaching DMC4 and being able to use Agni and Rudra, or carrying Alastor and Ifrit again in Devil May Cry 5. The truth is, unlike some other hack and slash games like Bayonetta or Ninja Gaiden, where we always get the iconic weapons back, plus the weapons which are unique to that specific game, in Devil May Cry series this never happens. And the potential, combos and moves of each game end up being unique to that specific game, which also makes every Devil May Cry pretty unique in its own right. If I want to do some guitar riffs while beating up an enemy, I play Devil May Cry 3. Shooting a bunch of lightning bolts, that's something for DMC1. You can do that in 3 too, but it's not that cool in there. Manipulating a bunch of darts, using the rolls to build long and technical combos on top of having a specific glitch to launch enemies with other weapons attacks. You only see that in DMC4, and that's memorable. But I want to do that in the other games too, and what's left is that feeling that in every game you have to start stripped down again, because, well, for progression's sake, fine, okay, you could argue that. And honestly, if we went in fully loaded with everything we earned from the other game, that would be pretty broken. But balance aside, there's nothing that justifies me not being able to get the weapon back, at least as a bonus. Why is it that in Devil May Cry 5 DLCs, instead of bringing a recolored motorcycle with one extra move, they didn't bring back Lucifer? All that's left of Lucifer is like the rose. I would much rather have paid to get Lucifer, Pandora, Artemis, which, well, you're gonna find out something pretty cool about this weapon in a bit. But I want to know, where did the weapons go? Of course, I had to do some research for that, right? And so, I found the answers about their whereabouts in at least 3 alternative Devil May Cry media. Still, I'll be honest, not even those media explain everything. But I want to be a good source of information around here, so wherever I couldn't find a definitive answer, I used my own brain to cross-reference information and try to find an answer that does make sense. Of course, before we get to them, drop a like on the video. I mean, are you liking the video so far? I expect the answer is yes. And of course, subscribe to the channel as well and turn on that bell to help me reach the first 1000 subscribers and so you don't miss any of my next videos. Alright, like I said before, some people say Dante sells his weapons to pay off debts, and that is true. And also it isn't. In reality, Dante doesn't sell all his weapons, but instead he pawns them. And if you don't know what pawning something means, basically, you hand over something you own, like a motorcycle or a house, as collateral to someone who's going to lend you money. While that object is in the other person's hands, you have to pay a certain interest every month, so the person keeps holding onto it for you. If you have enough money, you can buy your item back in full, and if you stop paying the interest, then that person can just go ahead and sell the item that used to be yours, but now belongs to them. Yeah, I know, this kind of information is a bit boring, but hopefully the clips on screen kept you from dying of boredom. Now, who does Dante hand his weapons over to? Who is it? Who would be crazy enough to acquire demonic artifacts powerful enough to set a person on fire just by touching them? Or maybe that won't stop shattering? That's where the lack of context problems in Devil May Cry come in, because Devil May Cry's lore happens to be a lot bigger outside the games than inside them, as absurd as that sounds. There's a lot of characters you never heard of, but who show up in novels, comics, and drama CDs. One of these characters is Enzo Ferino, who, if you're familiar with Bayonetta, he is the same character, and at the same time he isn't. That's because both DMC1 and Bayonetta 1 are creations of Hideki Kamiya. Enzo's first appearance in Devil May Cry was actually in the Devil May Cry 1 American manual for PS2, and he worked for a long time as Dante's agent since even before Devil May Cry 3. You might be asking me now, but Black, what does this Enzo have to do with Dante losing his weapons? Everything, my friend, because it's to him that Dante loses them. But let me tell you why. For narrative purposes, let's assume that Dante, from the end of Devil May Cry 3 up to the start of Devil May Cry 1, was in possession of every weapon he collected in that game. If you look closely at the Devil May Cry, in the beginning of Devil May Cry, there are several weapons scattered all over the place, and I seriously don't want to try to understand why all of them are Alastor plus the Bang of Time, when we haven't even got Alastor yet, and neither the Bang of Time. Well, Devil May Cry 1 is full of inconsistencies, what can I do? It's a 31 game, but let's use our brains here, and imagine that each one of those weapons was a weapon from Devil May Cry 3. Now, there's no continuity error at all. You probably remember that at the end of Devil May Cry 1, after Dante escapes with Trish on this plane, they form a partnership, and rename Devil May Cry to Devil Never Cry. Then magically the agency goes back to being called Devil May Cry in the 2007 anime, in DMC4, and that always drove me crazy because, dude, didn't the name change at the end of the first game? How did it go back to the old name, damn it? And in reality, there's a reason why Devil Never Cry went back to being called Devil May Cry, and it has everything to do with Dante losing his weapons. During this time, when Dante started working with Trish, Morrison was already bringing more cases for Dante to handle, when one day, out of nowhere, Enzo shows up at the Devil May Cry with an unexpected invitation. Dante was sleeping, so he wakes up in a bad mood, refuses, Trish tries to convince him, and Dante decides they'll settle this with a card game. Turns out, Dante doesn't have much luck with games, and he loses. So he decides to go to the job together with Trish, but Enzo offers to tag along, which is unusual because agents don't get involved in that kind of work. And the weirdest part is Enzo didn't even believe in demons. Yeah, that's for real. He brings in jobs that involve demons but doesn't believe in them. So the three of them head out to some ruins, which is where the case is going to unfold. Enzo disappears. Some demons materialize around Dante and Trish. Dante suggests they take care of these creeps in 5 minutes. Trish suggests wrapping it up in 2. After the confrontation against the demons, Enzo reappears with a strange bulge under his clothes. And after being questioned, they find out he's in possession of a devil arm made by a craftsman named Machiavelli. This guy was basically the greatest gunsmith of the underworld, rivaling Sparta, who was the greatest swordsmith. The weapons Machiavelli made had a very specific name, Machiavelli's demonic beasts, and you'll understand why in just a bit. Leaving the ruins and heading back to civilization, Enzo, who is very clever and also very dumb, takes the weapon to the original client who wanted it, and this is where things start getting bizarre. During the negotiation, a demon spider comes through the window, kills the client, threatens to steal the weapon from Enzo, who thinks he's having a really wild dream. He tries to let go of the weapon, which simply won't leave his hand. Then there's a confrontation that isn't detailed very well in the drama CD, because by the time Dante and Trish arrive at this place, all is already over and Enzo had been teleported somewhere else. There's more detail to the story, but to sum it up, when they finally find Enzo, who still thinks he's hallucinating, the weapon is becoming part of Enzo's arm. At which point, Trish explains, some of Machiavelli's weapons have the ability to steal the victim's body and turn the whole body into a weapon itself. It's basically possession. Dante uses ebony and ivory, but the arm deflects the bullets. Without many options left, Dante, goes with the most desperate route. He pulls Rebellion off his back and severs Enzo's arm to stop the possession from spreading. This saves Enzo's life, but now he is without an arm for the rest of his life. After this case, Trish decides to travel to search for more devil arms that might be lost out there, as they can end up putting human lives at risk. Since she'll be away for a long time, she suggests Dante switch the agency's name back to Devil May Cry, since Devil Never Cry implied a partnership between the two of them. Dante agrees, and so by the time we get to the Devil May Cry anime, the agency already had its classic name back. Now, it might seem like I went off topic, but I actually needed to tell you this story so you do understand the reason why Dante always loses his weapons. So remember, Dante was holding onto the weapons he got in Devil May Cry 3, as well as the ones he collected in Devil May Cry 1, and this whole case happened with Trish and Enzo involved. Well, in a bit I'll explain to you why the swords keep changing between the first 3 games, but for now, you're about to find out that after this incident, Enzo quit the agent job and opened a pawn shop. Dante felt indebted to Enzo for cutting his arm off, so he left his weapons as collateral to guarantee he'll pay off this debt of his. Enzo agrees, and periodically, every month, part of the earnings Dante gets from the jobs Morrison brings in ends up going to Enzo, to pay off the interest while the weapons are pawned. Enzo reveals at some point that he's actually sad whenever Dante remembers to pay, because what he really wants is to sell those weapons. As for using the weapons again, like we want in the games, in theory, Dante can't use these weapons while they are pawned with Enzo. But sometime later, and this is already after the events of the anime but before DMC2, Lady, along with Patty and Morrison, visit Enzo's shop one day. Inside the shop, Lady touches a weapon that we immediately find out is also one of Machiavelli's creations. This weapon transforms Lady, who's now possessed by a female demon named Titania. Dante shows up at the scene. In the middle of the chaos, he quickly asks Enzo permission and uses Cerberus to build an ice wall. Agni and Rudra keep yapping and don't help at all. When one of Titania's shots almost hits Patty, the sword Alastor intervenes by itself, jumping in the way and shielding Patty. Dante feels grateful his old companion acted so quickly, takes hold of it to fight Titania, uses a round trip that manages to hurt Titania and free Lady without having to kill her, or cut off her arm like what happened to Enzo, and in the end, everything works out fine. An interesting detail is that out of all the weapons Dante left as collateral with Enzo, only one of them was actually sold, which were the Agni and Rudra blades, because Dante couldn't stand listening to them bicker anymore. As for Dante's main swords changing between DMC1 and DMC3, or chronologically between DMC3 and DMC2, I have my own explanation. After the events of Devil May Cry 3, Dante put Rebellion aside and started using Force Edge because it was his father's sword, and also because it was a much more powerful sword than Rebellion. Of course, if you were to compare them in gameplay terms, Rebellion from Devil May Cry 3 against Force Edge from Devil May Cry 1, obviously Force Edge looks like nothing much, but in the lore, this sword is actually much more powerful, later merging with the power of the amulets to become the Devil Sword Sparda, which Dante leaves in Trish's possession. And going back to the Devil May Cry, he puts Alastor away and goes back to using Rebellion, which is his true sword. It's also interesting that in one of the concept arts for Devil May Cry 2, Dante appears with Alastor on his back, and there were plans for him to use Alastor in this game, but the developers needed a reason for Dante to have his own Devil Trigger, so they created a new sword, which ended up becoming his definitive sword throughout the series. So there you go, a little bit of lore about the game's development on top of the universe we actually play in. And among all Dante's weapons, 3 specifically are permanently destroyed, thanks to the events of Devil May Cry 5. In chronological order, the first one is Cerberus, which Dante uses in the battle against Balrog in the novel Before the Nightmare. During this fight, Dante asks Balrog how he managed to escape into the demon world. Balrog replies it was through a rift between dimensions, created by a blade fragment, which Dante sees and recognizes as part of the Yamato. So after Dante defeats Balrog and gets the gauntlets we use in Devil May Cry 5, he uses the full power of Cerberus to destroy the fragment, closing the rift and destroying Cerberus in the process too. The second weapon, also shown in the novel Before the Nightmare, is Artemis. A fun fact for you by the way, this devil arm is also one of Machiavelli's creations. Trish equips it for the battle against Irisin, which obviously doesn't show up in the game, but it's because of this weapon's power that Irisin manages to turn Lady into Artemis herself. And remember, the power of Machiavelli's weapons was exactly to possess the being and use them as a weapon. After this event, Artemis ends up in an unusual state, and the only thing left is this little crystal here, which Nico uses to make a breaker for Nero. The third weapon destroyed happens to be Rebellion, but this one isn't that much of a loss since now it is part of the Devil's Sword Dante. Now, don't be shy, comment down there if you enjoyed my narration. I know this was long, but I wanted to bring a full explanation worth of your time. And what other questions about the Devil May Cry universe you have that you've never found an explanation for? I'll read all the comments. Thank you for watching, this was Dante Black EX, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, jackpot!